All right, good morning. Good morning to everybody. This is February 19th. This is the Community Policing Ad Hoc, the 15-01 Ad Hoc meeting of this date. And let's just dive right in. Brenda, did you hear anything from Rudy? No? Okay. So what was our leave off point, Jesse?
Two things. Rudy, I am working with trying to get on. He's trying to log in. I'll continue working on it. And we were working 2 weeks ago on the specific duties of the CROs, which is this section 2. We had discussions about whether this list that we have built out of their specific duties, which ones are expected, which ones should be shalls. And so as we're working through this document, I think now we have started to turn to the more technical aspects, which are 3, use and auditing of the SARANET database, 4, assignment to neighborhood councils, data collection and dissemination. I think a good chunk of today's conversation could be about the evaluation section. So we have that portion to take on. Once we get through this portion, then hopefully if we get finished with it today, great. If not, then that's okay. We'll keep working at it. But after this, we'll start talking about the section, which is community meetings.
Okay, so we want to do we want to determine or at least discuss any of the questions around what are expected versus what are shalls? Or should we go on to that section 3 on the use and auditing of the SARANET database?
I think we did have a lot of discussion about uses expected versus shalls. I will note that at our last meeting, Mr. DeVries and Ms. Hawthorne and Ms. Thompson weren't able to make it. So if they have thoughts, that'd be a great time to take that on right now. If not, then we can just move on.
No, I think you guys should keep moving forward. I don't want to hold you up.
Okay, let me just highlight something that I had just for people's thoughts, and that is around Mike Nesperis's comments. And unfortunately, he had some family commitments, so he won't be with us today. But one of the things that I just want to mention, keeping in mind regarding the SARANET database and reporting of the CROs to the neighborhood councils on the priorities that are being taken through the SARA process. His comment was that, and it was valid, is that these reports at the neighborhood councils of the progress of the SARA database, the priorities through the SARA database, may in fact have a couple of impacts. Well, the one he mentioned was tipping off the bad guys, and he used a phrase called expansion. Is that expansive discovery? Is that right, Jesse? Is that what it was? Yeah.
Yep.
So in short, I think there is some consideration need to be made by, I would think, the CROs in terms of what they present in their reports back to the neighborhood council at the completion of each step. That the consideration being you want to tip off the bad guys. You certainly don't want to compromise any investigations or any ongoing projects or actions that are going to be taken. So I would think that that's definitely something to keep in mind. The other thing that I'm fuzzy about, my lack of legal background, is in what way these reports can then affect the CROs, the potential for the CRO being a witness in a case. So I don't know if Jesse wants to chime in on this, because I'm certainly fuzzy on it. but there is a consideration, and that was Mike's point in terms of this expansion of discovery aspect of what the CROs may report back to the neighborhood councils. You want to give us just a brief shot at what that impact would be, Jesse?
I can try, and of course, Judge Harbin Forte could correct me if I'm wrong, as I often am. So when I think what Mike was thinking about was that CROs often conduct operations, investigations, and search warrants, and those search warrants often reveal instances of crime, which may lead to an arrest. It may lead to the charging of that person of particular crimes. When that happens, that CRO becomes a witness. That CRO needs to be a witness who needs to appear in court, testify in court, potentially talk about the execution of the search warrant, what they put into it, and testify at a trial. When they become a witness, any statements that they make known to the prosecution and are relevant to the incident to be turned over. And if they're making reports about that in a community meeting, and likely logging those reports and logging those updates, that's going to expand the universe of statements that need to be turned over by the prosecution outside of just their incident report or their write-up of the operation. And I also want to recognize that Commissioner Howell has joined us. He is calling in by phone, and I've renamed him so that we can see that he's there.
Great. Oh,
Thank you.
And good morning, Paula. Thank you for joining us.
Excuse me,
morning.
did you get Reggie Lyles also? Jesse, did you
Yes.
get Reggie Lyles's appearance?
Yes,
Appeal.
and yes, and Pastor Jackie.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right, and Paula, sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. Actually, I was at the last meeting. Jesse, you had said that I wasn't there. But I just want to ask just a question, and that is, so what? So what if the CRO now has said something in a community meeting that needs to be reported at a trial? If the CRO is telling the truth, then that report, I mean, it is public knowledge when anyone says something in the public meeting. And so what if I just do not understand the concern that's being brought up here. If someone could explain that to me.
I'm with you on that as a defense attorney. And the more statements that I have, the more that I can compare the differences between the statements and notice any discrepancies or tend to attack the credibility of a particular witness. I think it's specifically that which the police department or the prosecutor's office may care about. But I'm with you there.
So go ahead, Mariano.
Yeah, I think originally the concern before Ms. Barrows brought this up was that, any information given to residents or neighbors regarding quote unquote an enforcement action was going to tip off and maybe disrupt that action. That was, I think, their original concern. And then this came up, and I'm in agreement with Paula and with Commissioner Shea on this. My sort of, I'm back to, providing transparency and trust between CROs and the neighborhoods and communities. And if they're involved without it giving any information to the neighborhoods in these enforcement actions, then that's not trust building. So perhaps, what could happen is a periodic newsletter type approach could be implemented, and this could be distributed by the neighborhood councils and the NCPCs. And just, not anything specific, but that, first of all, this periodic newsletter type of approach can just give general information on what's taking place. In general, just general information, which is transparency, and that's what neighborhoods want. That's what residents want. And then if there's any kind of action, you can just mention very, general information, not anything specific. So, that could be the solution to that. But that was their initial concern was, their involvement in enforcement actions and that wasn't building trust. Thank you.
Hey, can I make a statement? This is Commissioner Howell.
Go ahead, Rudy.
Okay, so what I'm thinking, I mean, if so, the prosecutor or I'm thinking that it sounds like the DA is the one that has the gag on this information getting out. So if that's the issue and they're trying to say it compromises the potential for their case, they're charging their case or whatever. Okay, how about this? Could they just report on the status of the criminal procedure? Like, okay, found, charged, and then just do the steps, report the steps of the criminal procedure that's occurring, or dismiss. So that way everybody knows, like, oh, okay, somebody's been indicted. Oh, okay, they pled guilty. Oh, okay, or they went to trial. Would that be something that's easier to do?
I don't think that it's the legal process that expands the discovery. I think it's the report out about the investigative steps, search warrants, results of search warrants, what was found, arrests made. I think that's the specific issue, but I do think that concept of the very general, we did a search warrant related to this neighborhood
exactly.
priority, I think I don't think grossly expands or in a way that would compromise any prosecution necessarily. That report, yeah.
Yeah, it'd be general criminal procedure steps, and so that way everybody, like, without having to divulge whatever secret evidence they think they have against whoever, it would just like, okay, a warrant was served, if it's public information, the address, because I know usually when the officers go in, and it's a little bit secret with the getting the affidavit and making the sworn affidavits and all that stuff. I know there's they try to keep that close knit until the indictment or whatever, so the situation, somebody doesn't run or whatever. But I think the general just say, hey, okay, warrant was served here, here's what they expected to find, just general announcements of the procedures. So you don't have to disclose anything discovery wise with the details of how and then that would just be for the criminal defense and the prosecutor to distribute their discovery, but the general public can kind of see like the phases. Oh, okay, so something is going on with this situation. Is that something that can be implemented?
Well, I would think so. Reggie.
Yeah, I believe that if we understood government code 6254, we can get beyond this. There's certain things that are not discoverable that the law enforcement does not have to disclose, and it's already settled case law. We can't change it, in our committee or any policy we draft. So, but stuff like addresses after an arrest, search warrants and arrests, indictments, all that's public information and can be disclosed. But if ongoing or investigations or planning investigations or somebody working undercover or all that, they don't have to disclose that, and we shouldn't want them to disclose it. So I think this is already settled as far as I'm concerned. I guess I'm troubled at what are you asking of the CRO that they're reluctant to tell you. If you ask them, will you be doing a search warrant on that group that's 2 blocks away from us pretty soon? Of course he's not going to talk about that. But if somebody has been arrested, if somebody is indicted, If a warrant has been issued and served, that's public information, and they
Yep.
should divulge that. They should say, yeah, we at 2254 23rd Avenue, there was a search warrant served.
Yeah, that's simple. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's and anybody asking any of that, no matter who it is, can ask that of the, and they should divulge it. We're not a
Yep.
secret police operation. Who was arrested out of the house? Well, here are the adults that were arrested. We don't give out juvenile names. That's all settled. Okay.
Yeah, there's no excuses. They can provide general information. It's all public, so just put it out in one area. So if people if the community wants to follow, they can follow the actions.
The Commissioner Harbin Forte has their hand up.
Yes. go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to say that some of the information that can be disclosed has to be done by way of a Public Records Act request and some proceedings on that. So we should be careful. And sometimes the chief of police will like hold a press conference or something and say, you know, X was arrested or these kinds of things, but sometimes they could require you to make a Public Records Act request, and then you'd have to follow those procedures. I think that what we can talk about maybe and then do some research on what we could reasonably expect the CROs to say at a meeting. And that could take a conversation with Lieutenant Febble or someone else about what their concerns might be in terms of what a CRO might be expected to do.
So should we get a statement from that side about why they're reluctant to share the information? What do they feel? Do we know what they feel is compromised in sharing certain data? I mean, after the fact, like if they execute the warrant, it's been executed. I mean, it doesn't need to be a secret anymore. So have we talked to anybody from that side?
And that's what I'm saying. I think we should have a conversation with someone to
Okay.
see, to see what their concerns are,
Okay, sounds good.
Pastor Jackie, I thought I saw your hand up. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. You did see my hand up, but it's kind of been addressed by everyone. And I just wanted to say every neighborhood council is different. And the level of information that they would be expecting or requiring of a CRO is going to be different. And so if we're writing a policy, it seems like it would be best to keep it as general as possible to allow CROs the flexibility to share based on the interaction that they're having with that neighborhood council. So if you are in my area, we probably want to know, did you serve the search warrant? When, where, why, how, what is the status? There are other neighborhoods that's not necessarily the issue. But I also think that we do need to keep in mind the general goal, which has already been lifted up by Mariano and Paula and other persons, that you cannot say that the goal is transparency and then kind of get down in the weeds in terms of sharing information. We understand about not compromising cases, and maybe there's something that can be added to what is written where it says to the extent possible, maybe that can be clarified to say, sharing in a manner that does not compromise the investigation, something specific in that way. But I think anything other than that, you might be tying the hands of the CRO in a way that we may not want to do.
Thank you, Pastor Jackie. Just to put this again in context, my concern was that the CRO be expected to make a report at each step of the SARE process. What did they see in the scan? What resources they identify in the analysis step? How did that relate to the development of the response that they're going to apply? And of course, the assessment. The consideration that Mariano and others are speaking to is, and Reggie and Mike, is the possible compromising of an investigation, etc. So I don't see that as being that's more than reasonable. So it comes down to my mind of trusting the CRO to report at each step, at each of the four SARA process steps, but also keeping in mind that there is information that they cannot divulge, and people, I think reasonable people will have to understand that they're certainly not going to tip off ahead of time where they're going to serve a search warrant, et cetera. So there isn't going to be that level of transparency, we can call it. But I think that's what Mike was talking about. And if I have this correctly, then I can see that the CRO in their reporting at each step of the SARA process will take all those considerations into account. So I'd like some feedback and see from anybody that I got. I'm not seeing something, or I've got part of this or any of it wrong. So does it make sense to folks that the CRO in writing up their reports and providing those reports at each step of the SARA process back to the sponsoring neighborhood council would take these things into consideration? That is the compromise of investigations, etc. So any comments on what I just said?
Joe has his hand up.
Yeah, I just, having, worked on a SARA project myself years ago, the S and the A aren't always distinct, and the A and the R aren't always distinct. And so to submit a report at the end of each step, it just, I don't know, Jose, I'm starting to feel this whole policy is a little too prescriptive. Especially when we got 5 CROs covering an entire Bureau of Field Operations right now. I think, ongoing updates, you might do something as a response. And as you're doing that response, you learn more information that would fall under that assessment category. So I don't know, I just think it's too prescriptive, but seems like you guys are going back to what you talked about at your last meeting. And I don't have an hour and a half to devote today. I don't know. I just think this policy is very long, and the CROs are very strapped, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Joe. Any other comments?
Well, if we're gonna, not to respond directly to you, Joe, I understand you're right there in the middle of it, and you're trying to do what is practical today. And I get that. I've been in those circumstances. But if we're going to develop a policy to be where you are, or do we want to develop a policy to be where you have enough CROs, where you have enough time to do what we're requesting? So what should we do first? Should we say, well, let's limit the policy, don't do what we really want, because we're never going to have enough CROs, and it's always going to be too much work, and they're always going to be overworked. And then the way we do policing doesn't change. We're still doing policing like we've always done it, and we're always, at a disadvantage. Or do we want, we need more CROs. We need to think differently about doing law enforcement. So that means you need more people. So how do we do that? Do we make the policy for our aspirations, or do we make the policy to where we are right now? That's a philosophical question for me, and I think we all ought to be thinking about it.
Well, let me take off on that question. I think we need to have this policy be aspirational. I think we need to think in terms of what we want OPD to look like, not where it's at. And in terms of what certainly I agree with there should be more CROs. And a big part of that feeling that I have is directly tied to the fact that, and I'll call it a fact, that there's a percentage, and it's a substantial percentage of police officers that are responding to non-criminal, non-violent incidents. In other words, they're responding to calls that don't need a badge and a gun, in my opinion. And so it's that reordering of staffing priorities that I think we have to push for as a part of this policy. Because again, I don't see that we have the cops doing what you need a badge and a gun for. They're going to too many calls that don't require their skills and their badge and a gun. So that's something that directly to me translates to the resources that are being used for these non-violent, non-criminal incidents that should be devoted to the expansion of the CROs, and something that I think we should take up with directly with the chief, or at least with Acting Captain Febble, because I think that's a significant part of our attitude going into the wordsmithing that we're doing. So I'm trying to get the chief to attend one of our meetings where we can discuss these sort of issues. But again, I think I think OPD is spending too much time on non-criminal and non-violent incidents, and that's something that I think will be established in more specifics next month in a report that'll be coming out. But that will, I think, should lead to the expansion, not the reduction of CROs. So
No, you in support, to support that, Jose hit it on the head, because I remember when I did my ride along, one of the calls we did was somebody parked in front of a driveway, and that whole thing to pull up to the scene, talk to that person, all that stuff. I mean, it was like an hour and a half before the tow. And once we were there and called in for the tow truck is supposed to be in the 20 minutes. He went a little bit over, things go a little bit over, and it was close to an hour 15 minutes for a parked car. So now what could some of those responsibilities or duties be handed off to macro or to the specialist, the tech specialists I see driving around in the little Ford cars? They're like tech specialists. They usually come out and do the interviews and stuff like that I've seen. Could those responsibilities, force level or use of force, or where you don't need the firearm, could that be handled by macro or the tech specialist?
And that's exactly my point, is I think that OPD is spending too much time on these other incidents that don't require their level of skill and resources. And we have to make sure that we have the community, let's call them community resources like macro, et cetera, that can respond to these calls that OPD is going to now that they shouldn't be going to. So it's a two-part thing. We have to get cops to focus on what is really their job, and two, we have to have the resources to fill that gap and have them go to calls that they're going to now that they shouldn't be going to.
So Jose, if I could just interject, I'm going to sort of try to refocus this back into this policy, because I know that we have only a short amount of time and a lot of policies still left to go through. And this is a much broader discussion. I am sure that we could have for hours and hours and hours on end. Paula did have her hand up to some of the points earlier. My hand was also up, but it was just me playing devil's advocate, and everyone has done it already. So Paula.
Yes, I was also going to ask that we focus our discussion on what we need to do right here, right next. And I was going to reply to Jose's question about whether this, as stated, is adequate. And I believe that this, as stated, is adequate. It says, to the extent possible. I mean, I think that to try to get more prescriptive is just, why not say to the extent possible? That does not compromise. I think that's fine. I am fine with this, and I'm fine with going on to the next item. I do want to say one thing, which is the meetings do tend to spin off onto how we're going to reform the whole police department. We're not going to solve that in an hour and a half every other Saturday. So I'd like to just be centered on the policy itself, if that is at all possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Did you have another comment, Jesse?
No,
Anybody else?
Mariano's hand is up.
I'm not, for some reason, I'm not seeing all the hands that are raised.
I can help you out.
Any-
Mariano's hand is up.
Okay, go ahead, Mariano.
Yes, I agree. That's important for us to move on, but there's a couple of things that are important for us to move on and to move on in a intentional manner. And one is that, and I've raised this once before, is you know, the participation and buy-in by city staff and OPD. And when we don't have OPD present in 2 meetings in a row, that becomes a little difficult, because then we have to fill in, and you know, there has to be consistent buy-in in this, and participation. And you know, the statements, you know, about, you know, that you know, short staffing, and you know, it can't really fill or fulfill, you know, the aspirational kind of ideals or points that we're bringing up. You know, is just, you know, it just doesn't sit well with me. So on a more procedural point, I would just like to, you know, make sure somehow that we have full participation by OPD at these meetings. And, you know, in the beginning, you know, we did say that our strongest allies and advocates for this should be city staff and OPD. And it seems like, you know, that may not be happening. So that's just but I agree, we should move on. Thank you.
On my to-do list. Thank you, Mariano. Let's move on. Jose?
Thank you all. Shall we add that to that section then, to the extent possible, to round that off? That second point under 14. I guess adding it right on to the end of it, the end of that section after neighborhood council's next meeting. Or maybe better yet, after Sarah process would be more appropriate.
I'll get the wordsmithing down later. I just put down time
Okay.
considerations so that I know exactly what to the extent possible means.
Okay. Okay, if that works for everybody, let's go ahead and move on. This third section entitled Use and Auditing of the Sarah Database. Is there any additions, deletions, comments? Or does this sound good to everybody? If there's none, then let's move on to 4. CRO assignment to neighborhood councils. So I think in terms of, okay, let me just throw out any additions, deletions, or comments on this first section, these first 2 paragraphs, the first 2 sentences, particularly the second one.
I have a question. Do we need to put the number of neighborhood councils in there? That number seems to change already and has changed. How about just saying, however, each of the neighborhood councils may not have a solely dedicated CRO?
Yeah, I don't think the number is important, but it really hasn't changed. The neighborhood councils have always been 57 since the
Oh,
beginning.
okay. All right, I'll finish.
Yeah, but I don't think we need to put the number in there. So
Jose,
what if-
that's just not true. If I could just point out, we've almost never had 57 neighborhood councils. We have 57 community policing beats. We have several beats that have merged together to have one council. Right now, we've got about 44 at best. So I do think leave the number out.
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, you're absolutely right. It's, what I was thinking was the 57 beats that never changed, but that's not to say 57 neighborhood councils. There's never been that many. So what do people think of that second sentence? How each of the neighborhood councils may not have a dedicated CRO?
I think it allows for the practical realities of fluctuations in staffing as required. And I think it's probably a good thing to have in there.
So do
I'm
we,
sorry to interrupt, but
go ahead.
did someone see the question or the statement in the Q&A that notes that OPD is on the call?
Yes, I just saw that and I'm about to promote, I think it's Lieutenant Johnson.
Okay, thanks, Jesse.
I was trying to figure out in Googling who Ronald Johnson was. Thank you for putting that in there. I'm promoting Lieutenant Johnson to a panelist. Thank you for joining us. Very much appreciated. Sorry, we didn't get a heads up. Otherwise, I would have promoted you a lot earlier.
Thank you for joining us, Lieutenant Johnson. So we're speaking right now specifically to this, I don't know if you have any of this material, we hopefully you can see it there on the screen. The CRO assignment to neighborhood councils and these first two sentences. So any other comments on these first two sentences? I had a comment, but I wanted to make sure anybody else had a chance to speak up. So if there aren't any help me out, Jesse, if there's no hands up, then I just wanted to say that in terms of aspiration, I think that this should say that each of the neighborhood councils shall have a dedicated CRO. And again, I think it's more a question of what I think that that OPD should grow into, especially since I'm understanding now that there is such a substantial portion of OPD's time that goes to non-criminal, non-violent incidents. So that should allow the OPD to make the staffing adjustment to expand the number of CROs instead of reducing them. So if there's no other comments, I don't know if anybody's in agreement with what I just said. But let's go ahead and move on because we are running late. So we got about 15 minutes to 11. So let's move on then to the second section. This starting with absent. Those any other additions or deletions or comments on this second section of under number 4?
Wait, I'm sorry. I want to be clear. You're leaving that last sentence as may not, correct?
I am at the moment, that is a right. It's a may not right now. I put in the comment that Jose wants a shall because I did not hear.
Opposite.
I did not hear any other agreement, and that's something to come back to in the final draft of this.
That works for me. Any comments, additional deletions on this second section of number 4?
I just want to point out we are now under exceptional circumstances then. Just want to acknowledge that.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but that actually does it contradict itself. Each of the neighborhood councils may not have a dedicated CRO. Or shall not have a dedicated CRO. I mean, I'll leave it to you, Jesse, to wordsmith it, but that sounds like we're saying that, hey, They may not have a dedicated CRO, but in the next sentence, we're saying that CRO shall not be assigned to more than 2 NCs. And I also think that's too specific, with the exception of a certain beat. You know, if we're trying to craft this for, you know, a few years from now. Anyway, I just think those two seem to contradict each other. Jesse, I'm sure we all know what we mean by this. And Jesse, if you want to go in and change the words, that's fine.
Let me just be very clear. When you say that we all mean the same thing, number one, you mean that each neighborhood council will not have, or sorry, there will not be 57 CROs or however many CROs dedicated to only one neighborhood council. And concerning about the limits on this next sentence, which says that one CRO cannot be assigned to more than 2.
Except for a certain beat,
Right.
which is, give me a break. But anyway, what I'm saying is, what I believe we all believe is that we would like to have dedicated CROs as much as possible. If we are now making the judgment that we will never have enough dedicated CROs to have 1 per beat, which sounds like a lot of CROs, or 1 per NC, then we could say, you know, something like, and I believe we are all in agreement here, we would like to have as many as possible. And, you know, are being very prescriptive about how they are assigned. It just seems like that's not something we're writing for the ages. It sounds like something we're writing for what we would like to see today. Anyway, so for sure, please don't have the exception, with the exception of beat 13. I mean, for goodness sake. I'm sorry.
Perhaps that's what, no, don't be sorry. This is extremely helpful. Perhaps Lieutenant Johnson, you could inform us why, if any reason, beat 13 this exception for beat 13 is there, if there is any reason.
I'm not real familiar with that side of town.
Sorry.
But I know 31 actually has 3 beats, but I'm not sure what the actual question is about 13.
Well, so right, oh, right, you might be on phone. So there is a provision in this particular section that says CRO shall not be assigned to more than 2 neighborhood councils, meaning 1 CRO cannot cover more, like perhaps 2. So ideally, if there are 44 neighborhood councils, we should have 22 CROs. But for some reason, there is this 1 beat that's in here that says this beat have a dedicated CRO that must be only assigned to this beat. I think is the character or flavor of this particular, the meaning behind this. Why is that? What is beat 13? Why is it?
I think, let me just jump in. I think beat 13, they made that exception because there's so little crime relative to the rest of the city. It's beat 13.
Isn't it Montclair Village?
It's Montclair, Piedmont Pines. It's the entire North Oakland Hill area.
Right.
Okay, thanks, Jim.
Got it.
And that's why. So I think we're, as Paula said, I think we're all in agreement that we want to have as many CROs as possible. And we can, I think, unless there's any other discussion, I think we can move on, because I think we do accept the fact that there may be circumstances where CROs will be limited to just 2 NCs, and with that exception of beat 13.
Why is it written like that? I don't understand.
Just to make it clear that there's going to be no more than 2 NCs assigned to a CRO under, there'll be that'll be the limit of CROs, and then there's just one exception to that, and that is beat 13.
Make sure that CROs only have the number of beats that they can handle, so that they don't have too much work on their plate, too many beats to deal with.
I understand that part. I don't understand the beat 13 exception. What?
It just, they have the relative, in terms of relative level of crime, there's so little crime up there that the CRO can handle those 3 beats, even though they encompass geographically a lot of area. The relative level of crime is far lower in the hills than it is in the flats. So that's the only reason that I know of.
I think we ought to say it then, but we can move on.
Okay.
I think we ought to say it so people can understand it. Because of, I'm an ex-cop. I was reading that. I didn't understand that at all. You mean there's no crime up there. So consequently, who's ever up there in that beat can handle the whole area. That ought to be wordsmith so everybody can understand it. An 8th grader can understand it.
I hear you. I'm aiming for a 7th grade level.
Right, so maybe what we really mean there is CROs shall not be assigned to more than 2 NCs, except for those NCs where the workload is light. Just to make it more broad than just that one beat. So that we get to Reggie's very good point, which is, what is it here that we're trying to say? Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. I'm not being very.
Shame on you. Yeah, and what do you think that we can put in there, Jesse?
Oh, Joe's got his hand up. I think he's about to suggest something.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And then I have to go. I have another engagement at 11, but one of the problems I see here is that a beat and a neighborhood council are 2 separate things. And so, for example, right now, beats 20, 23, and 24Y or 24X is the Fruitvale Unity Council. And it's a big area. It's got a lot going on. It really needs more than 1 CRO. But the group from 20X actually would like to break off and have their own neighborhood council, which I actually support because I think that their interests are different than 20 and 23. Similarly, in Brookfield, Sobrani Park, Columbia Gardens, 31XYZ, Brookfield, 31X and Y used to be together, and then they split apart, and then they came back to, and so, I hate to say it, but we really need to be precise, I think, with our language, or keep it kind of wide open, because you could have a neighborhood council covering 3 beats with very little going on, like beat 13, or you could have, a neighborhood, a beat with no neighborhood council. They just aren't together. I mean, we had that around Grand Lake for a while, where I think it was 15 didn't have a council. So.
What's a good way to get at that?
Well, I think you're saying beats more than you are saying councils. I think more than 2 community policing beats, I think, would be more precise. And then I would scratch with the except. I think Paul is right. Saying 13 is just kind of, it does, like, what if in 15 years beat 13 is where all the crime is? It's not gonna happen. But
it seems to me that we should say something about whoever manages the program ought to have the flexibility to make those kind of decisions
based on data.
That should be in the policy.
Yeah.
Described and prescribed in the policy. And so that could be reviewed as demographics change and crime trends change.
Bingo. Yeah.
Well, I certainly agree with Joe's point about changing the NCs to beats. CROs shall not be assigned to more than 2 beats, given the fact that there are some combined neighborhood councils. I'm not quite sure how we would express the fact that there needs to be some flexibility due to crime levels.
How about absent exceptional circumstances, which you have at the front, and when crime data indicates otherwise?
Who runs the program? Is it the a lieutenant or a captain, or who is over this? Is it you, Joe?
No, I'm in the city administrator's office.
Okay. Well, we have to say
Yeah.
who makes the decisions. We have to point out who is responsible. I would say, or suggest respectfully that whoever runs the program identify that, and they have the flexibility to, based on crime trends, crime data, to have the discretion to shift the CROs around where they're more coverage or better coverage.
Sure. I would leave that up to the area commander, because the area commander is really the police chief of that area. And so I think they're the most aware at that mid-level of what's happening in the entire area versus the entire department. But of course, I think Lieutenant Johnson might be a better person to speak on that. And it is 11. I do need to go. I'm sorry, folks. I'll see y'all
Thank
later.
you for your valuable input.
Thanks for your time, Joe. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, so normally the person that's actually over the area, so it's usually the deputy chief that actually runs the program, and then she disseminates that power down to the captain. So right now in East Oakland, Captain Febble is actually over the program. Deputy Chief Mendoza has pushed her power down to him to actually run the program. So I actually work for Captain Febble, and we're under his control for the East End CRO.
And Lieutenant Johnson, while we have you, thank you. It sounds like you're lieutenant and a CR. Are you a CRO in the East Oakland area?
So just the background for me, Jose knows who I am. I've actually been with the actual program as an officer since its inception. So the beginning when we were PSOs, I was one of the first PSOs. So I've been in this program, and I'm actually just a sergeant right now, but I'm just acting as a lieutenant, and I'm over the East End CRO. So I'm a sergeant over the East End CROs, and then now the acting captain.
Much appreciated. Thank you for the introduction. Could you tell us, like, on average, how many neighborhood councils you were assigned to and what that was like in terms of workload?
Well, in the beginning, each area had two what we called PSOs at the time, which are CROs now. And I was assigned to all of Area 5, myself and my partner, and that was in the beginning. And then it switched over to we had CROs for each beat, and each neighborhood service council. Most of them only had 2. So beats, I can only speak to the beats I've worked. So beats 27, 28, 29, and 30 only had 2. I want to say 31 is one that had 3.
And then what was that workload like between 2 and 3 neighborhood councils? Was it just right, too much, could take on more? Don't have to say that last part.
Yeah, so for me, I don't believe the workload was very heavy. Sometimes you had trying beats that had a lot more to deal with. So as a PSO, I actually had 28 at one point, which wasn't a very heavy workload, but it was demanding in the fact that we had a lot of different projects going. We worked close with the NCPCs and tried to work through a lot of issues. My main beat was beat 29, which I was able to stay on my beat as 29 officer and actually work through all the issues and problems and stay on that. So once you have an actual CRO and we are set on one beat, then there's more that we can actually do to help out, and then our partners. So normally we'll ride as what we call an ADAM unit, so 2 officers, and we'll have, let's say, beat 29 and beat 30 officer works together. So we'll help each other with our issues and our actual project. And then if we have something big where we have to do, let's say, a surveillance to find something, then the actual whole team will come in and work together. So as District 5 team comes together and works together, it helps out. And it actually helped out a lot better when we actually had the CRT unit, because we can actually push things down to them and then actually help them out. And then we had more of an idea of what was actually going on the actual beat. You know, so we can actually come back to the council and we can explain, hey, you were complaining about drug dealing on this block or a problem house. We were able to go in, do a search warrant, and this is what we laid out. So after the search warrant is done, we would never give out any information before we did our actual operation. We would just let you know, the council people know that we are going into this, and this is what we're gonna start looking at. And then we'll come back and report after things are done.
Thank you for sharing that, especially addressing some of the earlier things that were that discussion that was going on. Sorry, we didn't realize that you were on. Mariano, you had a question or hand up?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I just want to welcome Acting Lieutenant Johnson. This is exactly the kind of participation we need from the OPD, you know, is boots on the ground, you know, experience, you know, like Jesse said, you know, the conversation we had earlier about, you know, information, what cannot be shared, you know, all this kind of stuff. You bring that direct experience. So thank you so much and welcome. I hope that this isn't just a one-time visit. I hope you continue this. Also, I have one quick question. How many area commanders are there?
There's a total of 6 now. Yeah, there's a total of 6. So each area has a captain, and then the lieutenants that work underneath them. Each CFO has a deputy chief that's over it. So actually, West End has right now Deputy Chief Bolton. The East End has Deputy Chief Mendoza.
Thank you.
And one question, quick question. Did you say that Febo is now a captain? Is he still a lieutenant?
Acting.
So he's actually a lieutenant, but he's acting captain.
Acting captain.
We had a captain. Yeah. So we had a captain that went out. So acting Captain Febo took that position, which bumped me up from sergeant to acting lieutenant.
And actually,
Thank
you. I hate to go back to an earlier section. I want to keep us moving, but I just had one quick question, which is you've been with the community policing program since its inception. I thought there was some requirement of rotation or going back to patrol. How were you able to do that?
Well, for me, I've actually been in the actual program as a problem-solving officer or CRO, and I've also worked as a CRT officer also. But I've gone back to patrol, I want to say 2 times, maybe 3. And then in the beginning, the PSO was an actual drawn position from patrol. So we actually worked in patrol from that position, and we actually worked for the lieutenant or the captain at that time. And that was in the beginning.
Okay.
Very helpful. Thank you so much.
So let's go back to the wordsmithing of this question of the CROs being assigned to no more than 2 NCs. Is it the feeling of the group that we should articulate a flexibility here in terms of OPD recognizing the level of crime and assigning the number of CROs accordingly? Or do we want to play with the words as we see them right now? Paula?
Yes, I definitely would like to see it just be the flexibility I don't know how you all feel about naming the actual person in charge. It seems to me like we could usefully consider who is in charge of the CROs and how to write into the policy and making that person accountable for some of this. I have no thoughts about that other than to think that was I thought that was a really good suggestion to allow the person in charge, people in charge, to make these decisions. But then we have to hold them accountable for it, you know. But in general, I think that gets to the point of what we're all trying to do. Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Any other hands up, Jesse?
Reggie has his hand up.
Reggie.
Yeah, I agree with Paula, and I think the person ought to be named, and it shouldn't be after hearing what Acting Lieutenant Johnson is saying. It shouldn't be the captain or the commanding officer. It should be the deputy chief. We ought to go right to the top and make them accountable, and they will make everybody else accountable. And that's how organizations work, ranked organizations work. So you make the deputy chief, who's ever over the program, the commanding officer, ergo deputy chief or the captain, whomever, based on whatever reorganization they may have, accountable for this, and then they will make sure that it's done.
So given the fact that there potentially is any number of reshuffling, I'll just call it that, of OPD and its structure, shall we just use a general term like the
Commanding officer.
the commanding officer in charge of the CRO program?
And you may say the highest commanding officer, you
Okay.
know, in charge of the program. And then, and you may say, ergo, deputy chief, comma, area captain, so they can understand, you know, exactly what we're talking about.
So highest commanding officer,
Yeah.
and what was the rest of it?
I said, for ergo, E dot G dot, commanding off, deputy chief, comma, area captain. So folks can know exactly what we're talking about, who is responsible for this.
Okay, so
So if there's some shuffling, and it's always reorganization in law enforcement, and when it happens, they know what we're speaking about.
okay, so from Pastor Jackie, we got this. We got a chat. Let me go there. In terms of how that
Yeah, I agree with that.
staffing and crime data dictates.
I'm just trying to assist with the wordsmithing. So the sentence would read, however, a commanding officer may permit a CRO to be assigned to 2 or more neighborhood council as staffing and crime data dictates. That way you can remove the exception of B 13 if that's something that we want to do, but it still leaves room for the flexibility that occurs in staffing and for the reality of where a lot of the crime takes place.
Amen.
Yeah.
Question to Reggie and to Lieutenant Johnson: if you permit the flexibility, how much is the department gonna take?
What do you mean?
Well, if it's if you allow a commanding officer to permit a single CRO to be assigned to 2 or more neighborhood council with this qualifier, if as staffing and crime data dictates, how far is that? How far can that be taken, or how, like,
Yes,
yeah, you know, you're setting guardrails, right? And
yeah,
so
you're
I don't
saying
want one CRO to East Oakland entirely, all the neighborhood
Exactly.
councils in East Oakland.
Right, but I think, isn't that addressed by as crime data dictates on, like, how would you
Exactly.
justify that scenario, given the crime data that exists in East Oakland?
we have the policy, and we have the oversight committee itself, and we have the citizens themselves. if complaints start coming in about something's not working, then we got to find out, well, why isn't it working? It's not working because they took away our CROs and put them in the places where they're not needed. Then we go straight to the person in charge. Does the crime data justify you making this move? If not, you are held accountable.
And Jesse, we take the S off dictate.
Thank you.
So you think this language will cover those eventualities? Because that will happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think
So, do we need absent exceptional circumstances? Do we just go with this sentence, or these two sentences, allowing enough flexibility? Do we need that absent exceptional circumstances? If not, let's get rid of it.
I can't imagine an exceptional circumstance where you would.
I think we can get rid of that. And also Reggie wanted to put in a commanding officer. He wanted to do E.G. E.G. A what ranks did you give?
I gave deputy chief because that's what Ron Johnson mentioned, or area captain. He said.
Okay.
And I
For
would
example, deputy chief or area captain. Is it area captain or area commander?
I think it's area commander.
Paula
Yeah, I
has
think
her
it's
hand
their
up.
commander.
I'm sorry. It's
Paula has her
commander.
hand up.
Area commander.
okay.
Okay, great. So
Yes,
it'll
it's area
read.
commander.
So right now it'll be, we're taking out the absent exceptional circumstances. CRO shall not be assigned to more than two. We're going to do NCs. However, a commanding officer, for example, deputy chief, we need to take the first paren for after however. Okay, however, a commanding officer, for example, deputy chief or area commander, may permit a CRO to be assigned to two or more NCs as staffing and crime data dictate.
Yes.
That sound
seems
good?
clear. Yeah, that seems clear and
Okay.
straightforward.
All right. Well done. How about the next?
Sorry, my hand is up.
Yep.
I know you can't see it. I just want, I don't mean to delay things, but I just want to throw in the question as to whether you want to hold that person, that commanding officer, accountable by requiring that they report to someone. Let me talk about someone in a minute, on a some basis, annual basis, about what those assignments have been. And I personally think that they should be reporting to the police commission every year on what has happened with the CRO assignments, because the police commission has real power. But they could also be reporting to the CPAB on this. As it stands, when they reduced the number of CROs so drastically, I'm on the SSOC, we were informed on the SSOC. It wasn't like anyone could hold anyone accountable about it. It was, hey, we did this. And so I'm just kind of wondering if you want to write anything in this policy that says this, these assignments, this assignment shall be reviewed on an annual basis by somebody. The police commission, I would suggest. But I don't know. I just don't know what you guys think. I mean, you're the police commission, so what do you think?
You sure CPAB doesn't want this?
I'm sure they do, but the question is, what actual power do they have?
Who has the power?
I think the commission should review annually.
There you go.
Report and review to the police commission annually.
Certainly agree with that. I'd certainly like to hear, as a resident, through the police commission, what's the justification for the assignments, especially with the changes during the year of crime data. So I'd like to hear that, how that, those lines of thinking went into the decision made by the commanding officer. So I think it's a good idea.
The one thing that I would say about that is that I wonder, and this is a question to you, Paula, is there a good attendance of neighborhood council members or coordinators at CPAB? Such that they might have the information, they might be able to say what's happening. Because they are in many ways the stakeholders.
When I was on the CPAB, I'm not on it anymore. We would only hear from the NC and CPCs when there was a problem. So it's not like everybody comes all the time. On the other hand, I hear what you're saying, Jesse, and perhaps this would be a two-step process. Report to the CPAB, which then refers the report to the police commission.
Yeah, especially when there is a bubbling or outpouring of concern as to, you know, our CRO is spread way too thin
Right.
of some sort, and then please make this recommendation, do something, please commission.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, for the moment, is this wording acceptable?
And I just have one, are we gonna, I have a question, are we gonna say NCs or are we gonna change it back to neighborhood councils? Why did we put in the full word? That's something we can do later on.
I don't like acronyms in policies. Especially when you forget what the acronym is, and I always forget.
Okay, at least it's right there above, in the sentence above, neighborhood council, paren, NC, close paren. But if we're gonna use neighborhood councils throughout, then we'll just go back and make a global change and take out all of the NCs, all of the references to NCs, and change it to neighborhood council. But that's something we can do when we finalize it, if that's going to be what we do.
Right. Thank you.
Okay, we good down through reviewed on an annual basis by CPAB or the police commission? We good down to that point?
I hate to be ticky about this, but if the police crime commission has the power, the reporting should be there. So it shouldn't be or discretion. It should be there, and CPAB and OPC report to both of them annually.
Yeah, I agree.
One report going to both agencies, but the power is with the commission, and we ought to have the commission understanding.
Not and or.
And
I know this is capturing
and.
This is capturing right now a debate about whether or not it should be the two-step process, both entities, or just one entity.
I don't see it
my
as
note later on.
Brother Shay, I don't see it as two steps. I see it as a step. You report to both of them. You know, that's one step. You know, who's doing the reporting out? The commanding officer. So what do we want them to do? We want them to engage with the public. So they go to both agencies and make that annual report, or they issue an annual report and it's sent to both agencies. That's a step.
Yep.
What I want to capture is the and perhaps like it's one thing for the police to report that these reassignments are happening. It's another thing to capture the community expression of how it's affecting the community, how it's affecting the neighborhood councils, and whether it's a good idea or not. Right. And that's what I'm trying to capture. And I think I can figure out, I think there's a way to write it in, and that's what my thought is about it.
I think I understand your thought, but I don't think they're that disconnected. I think if they make one report to the police oversight commission simultaneously to the neighborhood, and in that report the neighborhood is upset, they're going to go to the seat of power. The seat of power is going to be the citizen oversight. So I think the citizen oversight is where we want to discuss anything that is we're at a disadvantage about or disgruntled about. And that keeps the citizen oversight commission close to the neighborhoods.
Yeah. Any hands up? Just,
No.
okay. Are we good, down to this point? I'll go ahead and let you finish, Jesse.
Okay.
All right, we good down to that point? How
Thumbs
about
up for Paula.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and I would only say that one first thing before we go, do we want the annual report to include an assessment about the impact of the reassignment on the community? So maybe as part of the report, we wanted to say, we want the report to say what the impact was.
Well, I think with that's where the community would come in. Because I would want to hear from the community as to what the impact is, not from OPD. I think if in fact we have that sense about capturing community impact, that's where we'll hear that feedback. As Reggie said, that's where it would more likely be captured at the police commission, because that's where the power is.
Exactly. And so when they submit the report to us, that report should have a section about impact of their reassignment on the community. The reassignments had a devastating impact on the community. We received numerous complaints about it or whatever. Or
Brilliant.
the reassignment did not appear to have any negative impact on the community.
And for clarity, the person who's making this report is the deputy chief or area commander and
Correct.
not the CRO?
At this point, it's the department I have down here. I suppose that the department generally.
Okay.
I don't know who exactly it's going to be.
I would think it'd be the commanding officer. Reggie, you had a comment?
You're muted, Reggie.
I was putting my thumb up because I thought that was brilliant. I think it's brilliant when you give and what is your opinion of the impact of the decision you made? That makes them very accountable. Oh, everything is fine. That's not what these 10 families say. So people understand that. So you have to be very careful of who you're speaking to about the results of your decision.
All right. So we good down to that point?
Yep.
If so, then
I'm time checking you. We have 2 minutes. We can finish up this section knowing that we have a regular schedule, but just letting you know.
okay, thanks, Jesse. Given that we have a couple minutes left, what do we think about this last 2 sentences? I think it's
Looks good
pretty
to me.
straightforward.
Yeah.
Pretty straightforward. Any comments? I don't, Jesse, any hands up?
No.
No hands.
Okay. I think we're good then, down to this point, and we can pick it up at number 5, data collection and dissemination.
Yep.
So,
Mariano has their hand up.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mariano.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to say that, I want this policy to be prescriptive. I want it to be aspirational, have an aim and be ambitious. So every time I hear that it's to this, to that, I'm going to push back. So I just want you folks to know that. I also, want to just make sure that we either try to get acting Lieutenant Johnson back, or that there will always be an OPD rep at our meetings. Thank you.
Lieutenant Johnson, thank you so much for being a part of this. Should I start including you on these meeting emails? I can connect with you after.
Yeah, sure. You can put me on here. I believe Acting Captain Febble is the lead on this right now, but I can always back him up. And if he wants me on it, yeah, I can actually be on there to help out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And what we'd like to do is to make sure that someone from OPD is here at every meeting, so that I'm hoping that if Acting Captain Febble cannot appear, that he lets you know so that you can appear. And to the extent that both of you could be here sometimes, it would be great as well. But your information and your prior experience is just invaluable to what we are trying to do. So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I would enjoy being this. I like this. This is actually great for me to actually know what my CROs are doing and what they need to be doing. So yeah, I would love to come back and help out.
Excellent.
Well, you're more than welcome, Lieutenant Johnson. Any other parting announcements or pearls of wisdom? Because we're about ready to wrap up.
I had one thing to say. Mariano speaks for me.
And Jesse, I just wanted to clarify that since we all keep coming back to the aspirational desire or goal for the document, perhaps you just need to state that plainly in the document so that we don't have to keep coming back to that question when there are things that seem to push the limit, so that whoever reads it knows that some of the things may not be occurring or be possible at this moment, but the goal of the document is not only to set policy, but also to cast vision.
Speak, sister, speak.
So, because some of the things that you all say, you will not get buy-in from the city and you will not get buy-in from OPD. But if they know from the beginning that the document is meant to establish policy as well as casting vision, then that may help with some of the pushback. I just wanted to say that. And then I'll circle back in the next meeting around the whole customer service theme that continues to run through the document, which I think is anti the concept of community. But we're leaving. So I'm going to save that for next time, but it's good to be back.
Yes. Thank you, Pastor Jackie. We hope that you can continue to come too and stuff. You have a way of saying things that just cuts right to the point. So
I'm going to do my best. Thank you all so much.
Very clear. Oh, thank you so very much.
Have a good weekend, everybody. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. This is wonderful participation. Very good. Thank you, Reggie, Mariano, Paula, everybody participated. I can't tell you how valuable this is. Thank you all. Okay.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Do we want to get on a call?
Let's just stay on for a few minutes here.
Okay.
And just